All right, so we'll get started.
And those of you that are speaking will need to come in in front of the screen.
Sorry?
Those that are speaking will come in front of the screen, so that way you can do videotape.
I need to click through just in the beginning. Is that okay?
I mean, I'll go click if you want to come stand right here since you're like first or.
Sure.
Whatever you feel comfortable.
Go for it.
Just kind of look at me.
Okay.
It's not for the camera. All right, so we're going to be doing our project on Saudi Arabia. It's a really fascinating country, and we had a lot of fun doing it, so hopefully we'll give you a brief overview. So as you can see, Saudi Arabia is situated right in the Middle East. This is a map of the country itself, and you can see where it's located. It's pretty close to Africa. Go to the next one. So we're going to start off with a quick activity. I handed out some questions on pieces of paper. I know. So we actually did an interview. We don't know anyone here in the Houston area who's from Saudi Arabia, but a friend of mine works with a man from Saudi Arabia, so we decided to just ask him a few questions. And so we're going to start off by having you guys ask us these questions, and we'll answer with his answers. So who has question one? Oh, and by the way, his name is Ali Akhadar. You do?
Where are you from in Saudi Arabia?
So I'm from Qatif, which is a city in the northeast. Next slide. Yep. And I can also show you some pictures of the next one. So this is pre-industrial, what it looked like. It's pretty much an oasis. And today this is what it looks like. It has this really cool fortress called the Taroot Fortress. And then if you go to the next one, we also have a lot of markets. So this is the Al-Khami Market.
And did the vegetables and all that come, are they grown in the oasis right there, or?
I would assume that some of them are grown in that area. It's a pretty fertile area, and it's right on the coastline, but I would also assume that not all of them are.
Okay.
Who has question two?
We do.
Awesome.
What are some values that are important in your home community?
So in Qatif, some of the important values, go back. Thanks. Some of the important values are helping others in times of need. Our religion is very important to us. Saudi Arabia is the central nation of the Muslim culture. And so that plays a huge role in our community. And also respect for elders is very important.
Can I interrupt right there, right? So Islam has the Sunnis, the Shiites.
We will get into that.
You get into that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but okay. And then I'll say what
I'm sure you'll have more to add.
Yeah. Okay.
So respect for elders is also really important to us, and as is family, and also related to family, all of the marriages are arranged by families here. Nobody chooses their own husband or wife, although they might be involved in the process. It's completely chosen by your family, and usually that would be someone that's in a similar clan or similar social status to you. Who has the next question?
Can you tell us about religious beliefs in your home community?
Sure, absolutely. So we are Shiites, which is a minority group in Saudi Arabia, and we only make up about 5% of the Islamic population. And most Saudis are Sunnis, so that you'll see that's a different group. And in Qatif, Shiite imams, which is like the religious leaders, it's almost like they're priests. They give sermons every day in the mosques and also in public spaces, so in the market, like you saw. And Qatif is a really close-knit community, and he said, one of the things that this man mentioned is he said, we don't easily bond with people from other parts of Saudi Arabia because of the religious differences. Who has number 4?
What are some expectations of men in your country?
So some expectations for men in our country is it is expected for older men to have a job. Men at the age of 24 are expected to start a family, get married, and younger men are expected to study and get a degree from university. So obviously that's a more modern expectation, and it's also probably attributed to the fact that he lives in a city. He's from a city. Who has number 5?
What are some expectations for women in your community?
Great question, Megan. So next slide. So in previous decades, women were expected to stay at home after finishing high school, and now women are encouraged to study, get a degree, and work. at least in the cities. But they're still expected to take care of the house and raise the children. Oh, go back. Who was number 6?
How are people with disabilities viewed with your community?
So in our community, people with disabilities, such as autism, were viewed before as an embarrassment to the family. They were not shown in public, and healthcare for those people continues to be pretty poor, and they definitely don't get enough support from the government. And some families, wealthier families, obviously, they actually go outside of Saudi Arabia to seek proper healthcare. So hopefully that gives you kind of a personal introduction to the culture itself, and now we'll get more into just generally information about the country. Do you want to put that right now, or no? Go for it. Okay.
Okay, so this is just to give you like a comparison of how big Saudi is to America. There is 31 million people living there according to the 2015 census, and we'll give you like a little taste of their anthem.
Very proud.
What's the language?
Arabic.
So we looked up the lyrics to the national anthem, and it's all about praising Allah, who is God, and also giving thanks to the kingdom and just respecting the kingdom itself. The lyrics are very simple.
Okay, so for the culture of Saudi Arabia, as we said, they speak Arabic, which is the language from the traditional Quran. And Islam is the big religion in Saudi Arabia. It affects everything they do in their culture, and it is the only religion allowed in Saudi Arabia. There's not outright restrictions on other religions, but it's very discouraged to practice other religions. And if you get caught trying to convert other people to another religion, they can actually be prosecuted for it. And so it's the world's second largest religion and is the fastest growing, and their belief is that Muhammad is the central prophet. And they have the Quran, which is their holy book, and it's divided into surah, which is the different chapters, and ayah, which is the verses. Okay, so for the way they rule, they have a monarchy. The current king is Salman al-Saud of the Sunni Muslim House of Saud. They've been ruling since 1932. And they're a very conservative, traditional, family-based society, which has a lot to do with the religious aspect of the culture. The dress is very traditional and is governed by Sharia law. And basically, Sharia law is the law that has to do with like the Islamic faith. And they have, a lot of them have dress codes, such as Mecca has very strict dress code because it's a very holy city, whereas if you go out into other cities, it might not be as strict. And for men, what they typically wear is, you see he's wearing white underneath the brown, that's called a thobe, and it's very light. And they can be different colors depending on like different traditions going on. They can be made of wool in the winter. And they wear something on top of it called a dish, which is usually brown. It can be different colors as well, depending on the ceremonies. And the headdress is a really significant part of the culture as well. They usually wear, it's called a tigiya, which is underneath it to keep it on the head, the gutra, which is the checkered cloth, and the igal, which helps keep it on the head. And for women, they wear the black, all black, and it's the black abaya, and it usually covers all of the body and most of the head, and a lot of times the face, which is the veil. And that's actually a thousands-of-year-old tradition, and it's been around even before Muslims started. And they sometimes will wear different colored ones depending on like weddings or other celebrations. As you can see in that picture there, that's supposed to be a wedding. And women in general have a lot of cultural restrictions compared to men. So they're not allowed to study engineering, law, or journalism. They're harsher on them for sleeping out of wedlock or adultery. And sports education, like PE, is not allowed for women. It's actually prohibited. And so because of that, there's actually a big problem with obesity in women, especially as they get older. And they're only really allowed to do medicine and teaching. It's becoming more accepted for medicine, but it used to be a big problem because a lot of men wouldn't want to marry these women because they had seen male bodies. And there's a lot of segregation in where they pray, where they shop, where they go to the doctor. It's separate from males a lot of the time. So it's just kind of like a picture that we found to kind of show like how we see their culture and kind of how they might see our culture and how like the differences there. And that's a video, and it just kind of gives some like facts on the culture itself.
Every team has a goal. Every team makes a plan. Only one team in the world has what it takes to succeed, no matter what gets in their way. Find out more at goarmy.com/team.
To some of us, life within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia may seem a bit puritanical. In the capital city of Riyadh, for example, there isn't much to do in the way of entertainment. There are no theaters, no bars, no dance clubs of any kind, essentially nowhere to hang out. And this lack of extracurricular activities might make for a boring Saturday night. But of course, the basis for this is the deep commitment to the values of Islam, the state religion. Being the home of Mecca, Saudi Arabia has a uniquely strong devotion to Islam. Daily life is paused 5 times a day for prayer, about 30 minutes each time, and everything shuts down. Banks, stores, agencies of government, whatever. And the prayer times change every day as they're correlated to the position of the sun. So in order to keep up, a number of people use smartphone apps to keep on schedule. And yes, even in such a rigid environment, an incredible 67% of people use smartphones. Now, that doesn't mean that citizens have full access to the internet. Saudi Arabia censors all media publications, online or on paper, to make sure they employ simple and polite language. The citizens are encouraged to report pornographic content, but in Saudi Arabia, this could mean a Maxim magazine cover. It all follows from the harsh restrictions imposed on women in the country. Now, women can't drive, they can't be seen in public without a 4-length black robe called an abaya, and outside of their husbands and immediate families, they can't talk to men in public without the risk of being locked up. Because of this, many restaurants and shops are segregated. Some places even have special times when women are allowed to shop. In some Western-style compounds, many of these rules are not imposed, and women can have a less rigid lifestyle. It only has to be by defense. The oil industry dominates Saudi Arabia's job market, but many millions of people who work in it are foreigners. Still, as the biggest oil exporter in the world, the Saudi Arabian monarchy has enough money to give generous gifts to its citizens, like free schooling and paying off their debts. The current king plied his people with handouts like these during the Arab Spring, scared that uprisings spreading throughout the region would come to Saudi Arabia too. On the stand-stop protests, however, a number of citizens spoke out to say that they didn't want more gifts, they wanted more rights. And this isn't to say that revolution would have reached Saudi Arabia without these gifts. The question of whether or not people are happy under the current system is up for debate. Some buy into the rigid system and find its principles and beliefs liberating. Others find it oppressive and restricting. Like anywhere else, the people of Saudi Arabia have their own personal opinions about what makes a good life. But as time goes on, some of these beliefs are shifting. If you want to learn more about some common misconceptions that Westerners have about Saudi Arabia, check out my other video.
So, as he said, oil is a huge part of the economy. And they used to be a very nomadic, more impoverished society, but in the 1970s, the drug of oil came up, and they discovered that Saudi Arabia actually has a whole lot of it. And 75% of their income comes from oil exports. They even have the largest oil field in the world, which is Ghawar Field, and they produce 5 million barrels a day, and they have billions per year in oil. And 18% of the petroleum reserves in the world are located in Saudi Arabia. So as we said before many times, religious influence on culture is very large. They govern all aspects of the culture. The Holy Quran and the Sunni school of Islam are the country's constitution. And pork and alcohol are considered haram, which means forbidden. And purchase or consumption of either is strictly punishable and is very illegal. Censorship is extremely common. Movies haven't been showed in Saudi Arabia at all. They're heavily censored. There's only been a handful since 2009 that have been showed at all. And arts and novels are heavily censored as well. They pray 5 times a day, dawn, noon, afternoon, sunset, and in the evening. And they even have a religious police, Mutawa, which is the Committee for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. And if the crime is severe enough, they have public beheadings as their form of capital punishment. So for traditional holidays, Ramadan is one of the ones most people tend to know about. They do dawn to dusk fasting for 30 days, and fasting is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, the other 4 being prayer, faith, chastity, and Hajj. And they're prohibited from eating, drinking, smoking. They break their fast in the evening with their families. They're not allowed to work more than 6 hours a day. And this is done to commemorate the first revelation of the Quran to Muhammad, and this is when Muhammad was visited by the Archangel Gabriel, who read him a verse of the Quran. And this is Hajj, which is a huge celebration.
Millions of Muslims are heading to Mecca right now. You've seen the photos, you've seen the videos, you've even seen the snaps. But why are they going? Well, it's Hajj. The Hajj pilgrimage is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, a requirement for every Muslim who's physically and financially able to take the trip to Saudi Arabia at least once in their lifetime. It happens during the Islamic month of Dhul Hijjah and takes place in the holiest city for Muslims, Mecca. The pilgrimage commemorates the story of Abraham, who Muslims believe was commanded by God to build the Kaaba as a representation of his house on earth. The Hajj involves performing several rituals over the course of 3 days. That includes circling the Kaaba, an iconic scene from Hajj you've probably seen lots of pictures of. When the Hajj is complete, pilgrims end their trip by visiting Medina, referred to as the city of the Prophet Muhammad. Meanwhile, the rest of the Muslim world is celebrating the biggest Muslim holiday, Eid al-Adha. Not the Ramadan Eid, that's Eid al-Fitr. The Hajj is believed to be the most important spiritual journey a Muslim will take, but it's pricey. The Hajj package for an American pilgrim, for example, includes transportation, food, and lodging, and can cost anywhere from $5,000 to $16,000 per person. Some pilgrims spend their whole lives saving for the basic package. For others, it's a more luxurious experience. Over the last decade, Saudi Arabia has spent billions modernizing the holy city and the Hajj itself. In Mecca, you'll not only find 5-star hotels, but also high-end shopping and gourmet dining, and it's paying off. In 2014, the government earned an estimated $19 billion in revenue from the Hajj. Saudi Arabia also maintains sole control over how many pilgrims get to do the Hajj from each country. And I mean, some countries get to send fewer pilgrims for reasons ranging from political disagreements to health concerns. But another reason behind the quota is to limit overcrowding that can lead to dangerous situations like stampedes. Despite the Saudi government introducing measures to improve security and crowd control, stampedes have been a major problem. 2015 was the deadliest Hajj in recent history. Saudi Arabia estimates that nearly 800 people died in the crush. Other estimates say the death toll was closer to 2,000. But stampedes and expenses aside, millions of Muslims will continue to visit Mecca every year, and the Hajj will go on.
Okay, so Hajj literally means to intend a journey in Arabic, and it's a centuries-old practice in which every January millions of them come to the Kaaba, and they do a lot of different rituals for a number of days. And it's considered mandatory if they're physically and financially able to do it, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and it is a demonstration of solidarity of Muslim people and their submission to Allah.
Okay, like we said before, family is a very big part of their society, mainly because of their religion. Social structures is organized into clans and tribes, and extended families tend to live together in large family compounds. It is customary for elder family members to use their influence for the benefit of family members. This is called nepotism, which is the practice among those with the power or influence of favoring relatives in employment and advancement in society. Hygiene and cleanliness are considered important in Islam since the Prophet Muhammad encouraged oral hygiene, and it's often done in public with a certain kind of toothbrush because he prophesized it so much. This is just an example of a family compound. The first floor is just kind of like a general area for everybody to hang out, and then the second, and they might go into the third floor. Each section, it's basically like a bunch of apartments connected together by like one big living room. So they have like an elderly room, an elderly son room that has his own bathroom, living room, bedroom, and so forth and so on. Saudi Arabian food, they're mainly lamb, meat, rice, chicken, potatoes, lentil, chicken, falafel, and pita bread. Popular in dishes include the mutabak, al-wukomat, kabush, masub, rika, and mandi. Sorry if I butchered those, not real sure.
And so what we're passing around now is it's actually date candy with coconut, so if you're allergic, please don't eat them. But a lot of their treats include dates in them.
Marriages are very complex and they have a bunch of steps to them. They're all arranged marriages, and it's between family members, and they're actually encouraged to marry cousins because it's like a belief that it strengthens the tribe. And because of that, practice has been cited for higher rates in type 2 diabetes, hypertension, deafness, and muteness. There's the 3 elements of marriage. So a dowry settlement between the groom and the bride's father, and it could be gold, jewelry, anything of value. And then the second is after agreement from both parties, the groom and bride, the father join hands, and the marriage becomes official. But right before this happens, the bride is actually put into a separate room from the groom, so she's not like pressured into saying yes. So she's by herself and she's asked if she wants to, and then if she says yes, then he gets put in a room and he says the same thing to make it mutual. And actually, before the couple even meets, they have a celebration that's completely segregated. So the women have their own little party, and then the men have their own. That was just like a little saying.
So we're going to talk about healthcare in Saudi Arabia, and one thing that's important to note is that health is something that's been considered for a long time, and it's included in the Quran. It's included in many of just the things that people say. So one of the sayings that we found, and this isn't just a Saudi Arabian saying, this is one that applies to a lot of the region, and it's that good health is a crown worn by the healthy that only the ill can see. And in this picture you can see that there's a woman, a female doctor, who's actually treating a man. And so this is something that wouldn't have been possible maybe 10 or 20 years ago, but it's becoming more and more of these positions are becoming available for women in Saudi Arabia.
So disability in Saudi Arabia. So under the labor and workman law, a person with a disability is defined as any person whose capacity to perform and maintain a suitable job has actually diminished as a result of physical or mental infirmity. Background is the country is based on the Islamic Sharia, which emphasizes human rights and people with disabilities' rights to live with dignity and benefit from welfare. The government just initiated development plans about 2 decades ago to assist people with disabilities and adapt to the society. In current issues, there hasn't really been a lot of research. You'll see on the next slide there's a bunch of graphs. And the last study that was really done was in 1997. So they don't really have a lot of studies that do like the prevalence and like what kind of disabilities there are. And if it is, it's because it's mainly on children. And the reason for that is because a lot of family members, they're embarrassed or they're ashamed that they have a family member with a disability, so they don't put them into studies. So there's not a lot of studies done on it. Like I said earlier, this is just some graphs, but it's actually from 1997, just telling you the different percentages of disabilities in the country.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the occupational profile, but before I do, I just wanted to mention that the drinks that you're all drinking, those are called Saudi champagne. And as we discussed before, alcohol is not allowed in Saudi Arabia at all, and so this is just a refreshing treat that they enjoy. It includes mint and apple juice and sparkling water, and it's something that apparently is served in all the restaurants there, and so it's a way for people to enjoy a tasty treat, and it's also perfect because their climate is so hot. So for our occupational profile, we picked Arnie Grape. He's 18 years old and he has a developmental disability. He lives at home with his mother and his 3 older siblings. His father passed away a couple years ago, and so that means that his brother, his older brother, has had to step in and be the main provider for the family. Since he lives in a rural and fairly low-income area, we would assume that his mother and his sisters probably wouldn't be working outside the home. And additionally, that it would be likely that he wouldn't be able to leave the home compound very often just because of the stigma against his disability. So he would probably spend his days watching TV with his mother, who's pretty sedentary, and then spending time with his sisters and his brother when he's around, but as they go about their domestic occupations in the home. And so currently he relies on his family to complete all of his ADLs. He needs to be reminded to eat meals, dress, and bathe, and he doesn't have any specific responsibilities. And that's also because they're not necessarily, in this community, they wouldn't be necessarily looking for him to care for himself. Living independently isn't something that's especially valued in this community, and so they're not looking forward to him necessarily in some kind of independent living setting. And there's also not a lot of community settings for him to live in either, just due to the fact that they're outside of a city. And so Arnie Grape, he's very curious, he's positive, he's cheerful, he enjoys spending time outside, he enjoys catching bugs and exploring outside. Obviously, as we saw in the movie, this leads to some problems with his personal hygiene, and this was exacerbated by a situation that happened recently where his older brother left him in the bath, and so he actually, since then, has refused to bathe. He doesn't want to be around water in any way, which is a shame because that's something that he enjoyed before. He enjoyed bath time before, he enjoyed swimming before, and also it's important because personal hygiene is prized in Saudi culture, and so for him to regain his independence and improve his cleanliness, we want him, and also to enjoy the things he enjoyed before, like swimming and bathing, we want him to be able to bathe, and especially to bathe independently, because currently he needs to be cued through every part of that task.
So personal hygiene is extremely important in Saudi Arabia. It is essential requirement for worship and prayer, and it's also a big part of their cultural values and beliefs. They believe that bathing purifies a person's inner self and cleanses the dirt from the body. So we can see that in Saudi Arabia, bathing is not only a basic ADL like it is in the US, but it's also part of the spirituality to cleanse their body, mind, and soul. So that is why we believe that it's very important for Army to be ritually clean for his daily prayers, his routines, and for his cultural values. So our long-term goal is that in 3 months, Army will independently bathe himself within 30 minutes. Our short-term goal 1 is in 2 weeks, Army will correctly identify the proper cleaning products to use on his face, hair, and body in 3 out of 3 attempts. And our second short-term goal is in 3 weeks, Army will submerge himself in the bath after 1 barbecue with 1 sibling present for support. And the theoretical frames of references that we used was rehabilitation and the task-oriented approach. And we used rehabilitation because we modified Arnie's bathroom to increase his independence and to just have a safe environment, such as adding non-slip mats and grab bars. And while we were working with Arnie, we also emphasized on his strengths and weaknesses, and we looked at areas of improvement, such as his fear of bathing, his safety, and to increase his independence. And we used task-oriented approach because the emphasis of the intervention was bathing, and bathing is very important for his culture and for his cultural beliefs. And our intervention heavily involved a lot of repetitive task practice, training, and grading the task to make it harder on Arnie until he reached his independence. And for our activity synthesis, we used several types of intervention to work with Arnie. Our first intervention was inclusive social environment, and we decided to include a family member, particularly his brother, because they are very close, in order to just decrease feelings of anxiety or embarrassment or fear that he may have, and to also develop a nurturing environment for Arnie. And we decided to grade this up by eventually allowing him to shower independently with no family members, and until he is confident and ready to do so. And so our second intervention includes his environmental adaptation. So we just modified his bathroom by adding non-slip mats, a tub bench, grab bars, to just have a safe environment, and also a long handle sponge to make it easier on him for at least a month. And then after a month with no visible injuries, we're just going to decrease these modifications to only a non-slip mat and grab bars to increase his independence but still remaining safety. And then our third intervention is just getting him used to the water and to just habituate him in the water, since he became really fearful of the water after his incidents that he had with his brother. So we would start off by reducing his fear of water by having him touch wet objects and using small sponges to touch him and just to show him that there's no danger. And we would grade this up by just eventually submerging him into water until he feels comfortable. And then our fourth intervention includes training on how to bathe and safety practices. So we're going to start out by teaching Arnie with verbal cues how to turn on and off the water, how to scrub his upper lower extremities, and also to just learn the different types of cleansing products, such as shampoo, washing his face, or like a face wash, or soap bars that is appropriate for each body part. And the safety techniques includes teaching him how to change water temperature, teaching him how to avoid falls, and teaching him how to avoid eye contact with the soap. And then we would break this up by having Arnie complete the whole task of bathing, and he had to do it safely and with no verbal cues. And then our last intervention includes the timing of that. So we will have Arnie use the timer to measure each shower task, and this could be like having him wash his hair for 5 minutes, or having him wash his upper extremities or trunk for 5 minutes or so. And we will also use cues so he can develop a proper sense of showering each body segment. And we would grade this up by having him complete the whole task again independently, but this time within 30 minutes and with the use of a timer and with no verbal cues.
So now we're gonna do a quiz to see what you remember about culture of Saudi Arabia. Does anybody remember what this article of clothing is called? Close. Starts with an A. Yep.
It's called an abaya.
And you can remember that it's an abaya. Well, actually, this isn't a perfect picture of it, but normally an abaya would cover everything but her eyes. And what is the current denomination of Islam that is ruling Saudi Arabia? So we remember in the interview in the beginning, he was a religious minority. And so what would be the religious majority? Sunni. Yep. How many times a day do Saudi Arabians pray?
5.
What makes up 75% of Saudi Arabian exports?
Oil.
Perfect. What Islamic holiday includes dawn to dusk fasting for 30 days? Ramadan. Got it. And then we just wanted to thank Ali Akhdar for submitting his answers, because it helped us put into perspective what we were reading about, because I feel like Saudi Arabia, we get a lot of negative information about Saudi Arabia from the media and from kind of what we see on TV, and it's interesting to put it into perspective what's good, what's bad, what's just different from an actual person who lived there. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. I don't know if you guys know, but if you came across it while you were researching it, do y'all know, like, because I know people who have moved there, like from Houston, like Americans who moved there for like oil and gas. Do you know, like, because their culture's so strict, like how they're accepting of that, or like how they live over there?
I know from some of the research I did, they are expected to they're not expected to convert to Islam, but they are expected to respect the religion and the dress. So like if you are a woman, you are expected to cover up in not necessarily wear an abaya, but something very similar to it. And the men, there's a bunch of I know foreigners they're not treated badly, but they're if you're a foreigner and you're going to a meeting, you're expected to wait. They're gonna make you wait just because you're a foreigner, stuff like that.
I have a friend that she moved to Egypt because her dad's an engineer, and they have their own little area. All the Americans that moved there have their own little
they have
area.
We talked about Western compounds, so they would probably be living in Western
I'm assuming
compounds.
in the military they have bases and stuff that you live
They
in.
told me they lived in one of those too, the family I knew that moved there.
When they go off the base, they usually have to
Those
leave.
people, I think, are separated uniform establishments. And that happens in a lot of these countries. But when they're seen in public, they're required to wear, their dresses need to be a certain length, because they do have a lot of their religious men walking around, making sure that people are abiding by the rules of the country.
So do women have to wear a headdress if they're
Women have to cover their head, even if you're a
They're
foreigner.
out in public, in front of other men, that's.
So could they get arrested if they
Yes.
I think depending on what city you're in, like we said,
Some
the more
restricted
central
ones.
cities, you're more than likely going to get arrested if you're not respecting the dress code.
It is technically
Like,
legal.
yeah.
So are they considered a closed country, or?
Yes, you. When I research, you have to have a Saudi representative to even get in the country.
A Saudi representative, okay, someone is sponsoring you.
So the women who wear the abaya, is there a certain age that they start wearing that, or do 2-year-old little girls wear
Well, the pictures that we saw, like you saw the picture of the family, so that family, they had a little girl, they had a little boy, and so I think it's mostly around like teenage, puberty type age.
So they let like little girls.
Yeah, little girls don't have any kind of covering.
Yeah, like
I
this
didn't
little
see
girl
any
doesn't
of
have
children.
anything covering her head.
Well, this is the women's only, I mean, there's a couple guys here actually, but most of these wedding celebrations would just have women and just have men. And what we actually saw is some pictures where the man and the woman would come in, have their first dance in front of all the women, and then the man would go back and celebrate with the men. So it stays separate. But as you can see here, yeah, that's a pretty young girl, like maybe she's 8 or 9, but she's not covered.
So it's super casual for kids because I could have a t-shirt.
Yeah, kids dress,
they kind of dress
like they do
normal.
here.
Yeah.
They may not be in like bikinis on the beach, but they definitely
It
wear
would be
normal
more like
clothes.
conservative, but like still kids clothing.
And even the women, a lot of them wear the same clothes as you and me, maybe covering up a little bit more, but they wear really stylish clothes, but they're covered up like this out in public, so they're wearing it under this.
They do a lot of accessorizing too with jewelry, and a lot of times they do a lot of like makeup,
makeup is
bangles,
amazing.
gold,
Yeah, their eye
silver.
makeup is flawless.
Oh,
Yeah.
And again, it depends on what socioeconomic status you come from. The wealthier may dress more like the Westerners, whereas people from the lower SES communities are more traditional with the longer skirts and maids and things like that.
They provide you with that? Like the government provides you with what you're supposed to wear?
No, you buy them.
Yeah,
They're very common to buy. Like everywhere.
They have stores of this kind of clothing.
I was saying like if you couldn't afford it, like.
I think everyone.
This is the clothing you would buy first. If you can
Yeah.
afford Western clothing, you buy Western
No, I'm
clothing.
saying to like the lower economic people who couldn't afford it. Like, are
Irrespective
they
of
given that?
No, no one's given any clothing. It's just part of your cultural tradition that that's
Yeah.
how you dress up, so you just have it.
I'm sure that
they
they have
probably
like
make their own.
donations
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah.
I mean, it's just like with our old Christian tradition, we wore veils and things like to church. You know, you could have fancy veils, but if you didn't, you had something to cover your head, you know, so yeah. If you can go back to your activity synthesis. So you'll have said, one step further, because you'll have said you're doing the rehabilitation frame of reference and you're using the task-oriented approach, and you can use 2 frames of references, you can then use as many as you want. Now go to the previous slide. So if you look on the environmental adaptations, the grading up and grading down gives you the impression that you're looking at recovery rather than just compensation, because you say you're decreasing the number of modifications. But look at this thing, but they're still retaining the non-slip mats and the grab bars. So then the rehabilitation frame of reference is pretty appropriate. Okay? But now if your plans were to modify the environment but to gradually decrease all of those modifications, then that rehabilitation frame of reference wouldn't have been appropriate. Okay, does that make sense? You're going to use a different kind of a frame of reference. You can just use the task-oriented approach. You could use occupational behavior, you know, one of those frames of references that you have been taught. Okay? Also, all of the different interventions would technically be a goal for each one of those interventions, where you're looking at just different performance skills in each one of those interventions. So they would all be different short-term goals. Okay? And then as far as religion goes, I know, Kim, you did a good job. You have the Sunni and
There's
you have
so
the,
much to explain.
No, you have the Sunni and you have the Shia, and it's primarily there was some kind of a religious, what do you call it?
Well, I know it's because they were arguing on who would be the successor to Muhammad. So I forget which one, but one of them believes that it should be his family members, and the other believes it should be kind of like how like Catholicism like elects the Pope, kind of like that. Like they elect someone out of the community.
Right.
It's a pretty fundamental belief.
But it's
so they
amazing.
even have different holidays.
Yeah.
But I don't want you all to go away thinking that this.
It's like direct too. Like, hey.
This was slide, right? Give me a second. What is it exactly?
That's a stop. And that was pause.
So you
Now it's recorded.
Yeah.
You recorded all.
Thank you. I'm glad you were around.